Hello and welcome to Buy Africa, the show where we focus on investment opportunities around the continent. I'm Tshepo Modiba. Thanks for joining me. My guest today, again, Mr. Africa himself, Langa Madongo, investment principal at Africa Strategic Impact Fund, for a focused look at the Mauritian market. Langa, before we delve into the market itself, let's touch a little bit about the broader economy and what are the key drivers here.
Okay, I think Mauritius, everybody knows, is a beautiful little island.
Holiday destination.
Yeah, you know, one of those places where you go to relax. So definitely one of the sectors that is thriving there is tourism. It's a beautiful country surrounded by warm oceans, white beaches. So it's
you look like you're reminiscing about a trip.
Yeah, thinking of going back there sometime soon. But also one of the things that they've evolved and become is a financial services center. The leading one here in terms of Africa, right. With well-established financial services and services offerings to the rest of the continent, low tax rates, as is classic of all the financial services center. Mm-hmm. And also one of the other things that they are continuing to do is also to diversify and try to come more in terms of manufacturing. A little known fact about Mauritius is that it's also got a very good agricultural business sector operating there, particularly in the sugarcane space.
Right.
Yeah.
And they make some of the best tea in the world.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Now, how did the economy get to a point where it was a financial services hub, if you want to call it that? Is that a function of government policy?
Yeah, it's a function of a government that made a decision to say, look, what's the strategy? Where are we going? How do we take advantage of where we are and develop ourselves so that we can become recognized for something? And then obviously one of the things that they noticed was the prominence of offshore financial services centers, Hong Kong, Guernsey, Jersey, and how they had developed their markets. Being relatively small, with about being in size about 2,000 square kilometers and with a population of 1.2 million people, it was necessary for them to find something that did not require them to take up a lot of land. Therefore, they focused on education, and they've got one of the highest literacy rates in terms of Africa, and also great infrastructure in terms of financial services and communication. And their stock exchange is one of the very good ones in terms of the African market, in terms of liquidity and in terms of numbers, proportionate to the size of the country.
Right, so let's delve in. We started on the stock market itself. Do the companies listed there reflect the underlying dynamics of the economy?
The companies listed there do reflect the underlying dynamics of the economy. One of the things that we will see when you take an in-depth analysis of the stock market there is the heavy presence of service-based companies there, right, as well as financial services businesses. There's a lot of listed funds, both from previously private equity vehicles, then list as a route to exit in terms of their investments. And the key players in that
like
space,
the Luxembourg of Africa.
Yes, it is the Luxembourg of Africa. I think some of the more significant players are also the banks as well, who are also listed there. Yeah. Actually, funny enough, the Mauritian Commercial Bank is the largest bank in East Africa, also the oldest bank in Sub-Saharan Africa, established, I think it's in 1873. Right. And those show you how robust the fundamentals for financial services are in that particular country.
So would it be fair to say a lot of the businesses listed in Mauritius really are generating a significant portion of their revenue outside of that economy?
Yeah, they've made themselves conducive and attractive for foreign investors, particularly on the African continent. Many of the companies that are operating out of South Africa into the rest of the continent find themselves creating vehicles that are domiciled in Mauritius, right, to take advantage of the tax incentives, to take advantage of the infrastructure, as I mentioned before, and also to leverage the financial services that come from there. As you know, with a lot of these offshore entity countries, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of structuring and how you go about executing arrangements and agreements in terms of business in general, from foundations to trusts to protected cell companies. There's so much versatility in terms of what you can do in terms of setting up your business, so it makes it very attractive for people trying either to come out of a country like South Africa into the continent or trying to come into the continent from the rest of the world.
So another case of a fairly small economy that's been able to position itself to benefit. Now, any interesting ideas coming out of the Mauritian market that piqued your interest?
I think the way they've structured their economy, like I said, the banking sector and how it works.
So it's got nothing to do with the fact that you just love banks.
I do love banks, but I like the way that the Mauritian Commercial Bank in particular works and how they look and how they've structured themselves and how they've basically created a situation where they've the bank for the offshore space in terms of Africa. They've got a presence as well in Seychelles, Reunion, but they've also now started to come onshore and they've got a presence in Mozambique. But they've also said, where else can we go? And they've got entities in the Maldives. So they continue to give themselves access to offshore markets beyond themselves, so as to have an interconnecting network, as it were.
And as a bank, what is their primary focus area? How do they make their money?
They make most of their money, as most businesses in Mauritius, on the commercial side.
Right.
You have most of your income coming through from corporates, and that has really, with their track record and their long history, they are one of the preferred bankers. They have to compete aggressively against some of the international banks like Barclays, Standard Bank from here, Afriasia, but I think they are fairly well poised to continue to dominate that space. And also they are the dominant bank in terms of local banking. In terms of the locals banking, they choose them as the preferred bank of choice.
Right. In terms of growth prospects for the bank?
I think the growth prospects remain high, but one of the things that they'll have to catch up on is how they service international companies coming into Mauritius. I think they also need to get out a little bit more, as it were, get their name known beyond the borders of Mauritius and in the places where they have a presence at, like your Mozambique. They need to expand and get more exposure into the rest of the world, as it were, because competing against global giants like Barclays will become increasingly more difficult if they don't position their brand significantly now.
And I guess the key question is, you've outlined the strategy of the bank. From a profitability perspective, are they able to earn decent return on equity?
They earn a decent return primarily because of the way Mauritius works, that everything they try to keep everything at a low cost, but to try to afford the service as efficiently as possible and to as many people as possible, not necessarily from Mauritius. So their overheads remain relatively low. I mean, throughout their whole network of over 40 branches across Mauritius and outside of Mauritius, they only have about 2,000 staff members, north of 2,000, 150 ATMs on the island. So they're really an efficient bank, and that efficiency then gives you a good return on equity.
Right. Putting that all together, is this something that investors should be taking a closer look at?
I think it's one of the many things they need to be looking at in terms of Mauritius.
Right.
Definitely.
Okay. Now that's a preempter for what are some of the other potential businesses to look at?
I think another one that I like in Mauritius, which is rare because I really like that space, is Air Mauritius.
Right.
Small fleet servicing key destinations, flights always full. Good returns. Another one that manages their overheads very well. It's a business that I think will continue to do well as long as Mauritius continues to be the hub for people coming into Africa in terms of financial services. They service the key routes that make sense for what Mauritius is. They are servicing Johannesburg, they're servicing Nairobi, they're servicing Hong Kong, London, Luxembourg, New York.
And what's their strategy? Is it to compete on price or is it to compete on services?
Their strategy is twofold. They're able to compete on price because they're very select in terms of the destinations that they service. So they don't have a situation whereby now one route has to compensate for another.
Right.
They are
so only servicing profitable routes.
Exactly. And then in terms of quality of service, again, it's one of the areas where they offer holiday-like experience, if I can put it that way.
You're making me want to fly with them. That's impressive.
Thank you.
And again, how does this translate from a growth potential perspective? Are we likely to see an increase in terms of the volume of passengers going through these routes?
I think one of the things that they've managed to do is literally almost become a monopoly in terms of flying to Mauritius. Everybody who wants to fly to Mauritius ends up finding that it's more profitable to do code sharing with Air Mauritius to Mauritius, and therefore they've got a lot of strategic agreements with a lot of airlines, and they find themselves in a position whereby they are benefiting from that. And I think with more countries outside of Africa becoming aware of the benefits of doing business in Mauritius, they will continue to attract more new clientele and develop their route base. I think, in my mind, it's safe to say that they have not peaked in terms of the number of routes they could do. I see them possibly doubling the number of routes, and also possibly doubling the size of the fleet.
So it's really a leverage on the Mauritian economy, given that if the economy is attracting more business, more tourism, they're likely to benefit. Yes,
and I think also with now that you've mentioned the tourism, one of the things is that they've done is that within the group of Air Mauritius, there are subsidiaries that, for example, a helicopter business that deals with servicing local business and giving tours and so forth and so on. So they've not only leveraged the attractiveness externally, they've also leveraged the attractiveness in terms of tourism, and then diversified their business to take advantage of that part as well.
Okay. So is it fair to say, coupled with the lower oil price, i.e. lower fuel prices, that this is one that you think there's potential for investors to benefit here?
I definitely think this is one that is worth taking a look at. In the grand scheme of things, looking at all the entities that are there is definitely one that I would make an investment in for the medium to long term.
Perfect. Let's leave it there. Okay. Thanks to my guest, Langa Madonga, Investment Principal at Africa Strategic Impact Fund. That's all from Buy Africa this week. Remember to follow me on Twitter. That's at Modiba_Tshepo, and send us your thoughts about the show using the hashtag BuyAfrica. For myself and the team, goodbye.